the killifish tank. Hopefully you've heard of them. They're a fish that typically gets about 3 or 4 inches, right? There's going to be some that get much smaller. There's going to be some that get bigger. But the cool thing is you don't have to have a heater for most of them. That's kind of a perk. They tend to be super duper colorful unless you buy the ones that are kind of a brown turd, which I don't recommend that. And you probably won't find them in the pet store. But some of the ones you might want to look into are like orange Australs, chocolate Australis, so Australia or Australia, that's how they be called. Nothos, which is Nothobronchius. They're kind of an annual killie. They don't live that long, but they're crazy colorful. You could do some breeding with them. You might look into blue galaris. Now, there are, I'd get the red form, which is kind of a dwarf version of that. That could live in a 10-gallon for quite a while, but most killifish keepers will keep fish in a 5.5 or even little shoe boxes. So a 10-gallon's quite the palace for them. Now, they can be pretty darn aggressive. You don't want to mix them with other fish. They got a big mouth on them. They're a little bit finicky to eat. A lot of frozen foods or live foods. So frozen bloodworms, frozen brine shrimp, live baby brine, mosquito larvae, all that. They'll love it. Some other killies you can do, the gardener eye killie. That's one of the easiest. You get those purples and pinks and kind of blue in there. They look really good. And you want to plant it up. And whether it's fake or real plants, you want to make sure that the male and the female can get separated so that way when they're breeding mode and that kind of stuff, they don't just tear each other up. But this is definitely a case of one pair or a boy and 2 girls, and feed them well, keep them happy, and don't let them get too hot. I wouldn't let them get above 78 really. After that, you can start getting some disease problems and that type of thing. Depending on which one you pick is what the water parameters will be like, but they're really pretty tolerant of a wide range. For most of the ones you're going to find in a pet store, when you start getting to those ones where you're getting from a dedicated breeder or a club member, they might have specific ranges, but all the ones I've listed are pretty adaptable to a wide range, so I can comfortably recommend them for a lot of people. So enjoy them. There's a lot of behavior, and they look really cool, and they're kind of a niche thing. Not all stores will have them. You'll have to go to a dedicated mom and pop type store, like a dedicated fish store, not a PetSmart, a Petco. They will have them. They'll have like some Golden Wonder killies, but they kind of get too big, and they're not nearly as action-packed as the ones I recommend. But there is a ton. Look them up, and you're going to see the color. It's really easy to fall in love with that color, and if that's something you're into, maybe you're the next fish keeper that is becoming a killifish nerd. Hey, let me know down in the comments what you're keeping in your 10 gallons so that way everyone can see all these different ideas and get ideas for their own, and we'll crowdsource a bunch of cool things together. The dwarf frog tank. Now, this is a tank dedicated to dwarf frogs. Not many people do it. A lot of times you've got a tank and you just add a dwarf frog, but let's say we want to go dwarf frog crazy and set up for them. I recommend glass top because they can hop out of there. With the way we're going to set it up, we want to put a bunch of pieces of wood or rock so it's right under the water line so they can perch up there, and they like to put their head out and kind of look around a little bit and breathe and do their thing up there. And you want to feed for food lots of meaty stuff like frozen bloodworms, frozen brine shrimp. You don't want to do things like shrimp pellets. They're so slow to get to the food, and by the time they get there, they kind of use these webbed hands to throw things at themselves in their mouth that they'll waft that pellet and it'll just disintegrate and ruin your water quality. So use things like a bloodworm. It stays intact. They waft it. It catches in their mouth. You can use live foods, but lots of meaty stuff. They are a carnivore. They're not really going to eat flake food. You don't want to do freeze-dried bloodworms. They're going to float the whole time. These things want to eat at the bottom. You can do normal gravel. You can do plants. Plants work out really well. You can do a bunch of frogs or not very many. Don't mix dwarf frogs with clawed frogs, but you can do like normal dwarf frogs with melanistic or golden frogs, if you will, so you can get a couple different color types. I wouldn't mix shrimp with them. You could mix snails. That can be your algae eater. You could do a plecostomus. A clown pleco would work well in that environment. If you don't do the pleco, you can keep it a little bit cooler, around 72 or so you don't necessarily have to have a water heater in there. What else can I think that's very important? I've got the plants, the pleco, the food, the wood, the glass top. Mostly just enjoy them. If you got enough plants in there, Java moss stuff, they'll start breeding. Now, it's quite a process to raise the babies, but maybe you want to. But you can hear them sing. Once they get fat and happy, you can start hearing like, what was that sound? Oh, wait, that was the fish tank. It was the dwarf frogs doing their thing. And it's kind of fun just to have some frogs living in your 10-gallon aquarium. You can put fish with them, but they don't do nearly as well. Like, it takes your attention away. And when you see a dedicated setup to frogs, it's really, really cool. And I recommend it for anyone. So it's just another one of those ideas putting out there. Give it a try. Maybe get yourself 5 or 6 frogs. You go, wow, this is crazy. They're always doing something. But I find it really enjoyable. Don't freak out if you got a frog latched onto another frog. That's just mating. They'll do it for, a day or so, and it can last a long time. Seems super stressful, but that's just what they're going to do. And again, it's another thing to observe going, geez, look at that. Who knew? So enjoy. They run anywhere from about $3 to $5, and the fatter they look, like you don't want them to be just round, but you don't want, if they look skinny, like you can see bones, they might not be fed well enough at the store. It's kind of common where you could put 100 frogs in there and you put a little bit of food and not everyone gets some. So you want them to, not look emaciated. So look for that when you're looking to buy them at the store. This one I call the Betta tank. So it might be that you've got a Betta in a bowl, or you've got it in a really tiny tank, and someone says, hey, you can't keep it in that. You got to get a bigger tank. So you got yourself a 10-gallon because it's on sale, because why not, right? Got yourself a 10-gallon. I'm going to do this right. So a 10-gallon can make a paradise. No pun intended for those who know a paradise fish, but it can make a really nice tank for a Betta. Now, kind of the same thing as some of the other fish tanks. If you have a red Betta, we don't want to mix it with red fish. We don't want to mix it with red plants. So look at the color of your Betta. Maybe it's green, maybe it's gold, maybe it's red, maybe it's blue, whatever it is, and then think of fish that are going to pair well with it. Now, what's going to pair well with it? Usually a schooling fish will that isn't very nippy, so like neon tetras, some of the rasboras. I don't know that I would necessarily do Danios, but there's a lot of tetras, a lot of rasboras. Pick something in there. The Betta needs to be heated. They like to be 78 to 80, and most of the other fish that live with them will as well. So get yourself a heater. As far as bottom dwellers go, you can go with snails. You can go with corridoras. Panda corys work really good. Habrosus corys, pygmy corys, coolie loaches. There's probably a few other options as well. I avoid shrimp. A lot of times they get picked at because they've got these feelers that the Betta comes and thinks it's a worm and is constantly pecking at it, and it's very stressful for them. When it comes to food, Bettas do really well on like freeze-dried bloodworms, freeze-dried brine shrimp, frozen bloodworms, frozen brine shrimp, real meaty stuff, right? But the other fish in there, not so much. So you might want to feed a little bit of freeze-dried stuff for the Betta, and then some flake or some micro pellet or something like that for the schooling fish, and then maybe, and I say maybe a wafer or something like that for the corridors or the bottom dwellers, but really a little bit of that food you're feeding up top's probably going to get by all the fish, and they can eat it. So maybe you feed a few extra bloodworms, maybe you feed a little bit of flake food extra, one of those two to really feed all the fish. And then it is nice to have it be planted, whether it's fake plastic plants, whether it's real plants. Pick one of the two. I prefer real plants, but again, pick out colors that are going to contrast with the fish really well. So if you're using fake plants, maybe you can do pinks and purples and greens if you've got a red Betta, but don't do red plants if you have the red Betta. Make sense? I think it does. As far as pH goes, somewhere between 7 and 7.8, anywhere in that range, really. You can push it a little bit either way when it comes to Bettas and a lot of these fish. You won't be breeding them, but this is kind of the, hey, I've upgraded from this bowl to now I have this tank. Now I'm doing live plants. Now I've got all these other fish. Look, they're all interacting with each other. And now I have a proper kind of aquarium, and I'm managing the aggression between things and that kind of stuff. And now I'm starting to really learn fish keeping as opposed to Betta keeping, which they're both great, but they are different. When you're managing a community, that is much different than one fish. So good luck. And, if you have any questions, leave them down below. Do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications. You need more videos like this in your life. We bring them to you every week from all around the world.